At the end of our career, Henk Dries and I decided to work together again as anthropologists. We are both anthropologists, and we now have a daughter who's also an anthropologist. But because of that daughter, for a long time we couldn't do research at the same time unless we would take her along, but it did not fit with the university schedules. And in the 70s, I had gone with him to Andalusia, where he was doing his PhD on urban ethos in the town of Santa Aya. And we learned, of course, we knew people there, and we went back a few times for a visit. But now it was the perfect occasion to go back. And we still did not have a long sabbatical, but we had a short sabbatical. So what we did is we divided it up, and for 5 years each spring we went for a month to Spain. And it was doable because, of course, we knew the people, we knew the language, we had seen the rituals before because we decided to study the ritual life in Andalusia, and so we had taken notes and taking pictures, and it seemed to us very interesting to see what had changed over time. And what was remarkable was the exuberance with which ritual festivities were held, and especially the Semana Santa, the Holy Week. And the Holy Week, during the Holy Week, processions are held, and that's the week before Easter, to commemorate the life of Christ and the death of Christ. And these events are, you could call them total social events, because there are processions nearly every day, and the processions are organized by cofradías, brotherhoods, so-called. And some of them are centuries old, and they carry floats around with a saint, with Mary or Christ or the Magdalene, and the whole society seems to be a little bit organized around these festivities. We noted that a very large part of the population participated in them, either in walking in a procession with a float, or as penitents, as Nazarenes, so they are fully covered with a pointed hat and fully clothed, so you don't recognize who's underneath, but you recognize which group they belong to, because they all each group carries different colors and performs at a different hour. But apart from the participants, there are also a lot of onlookers and spectators, because without the spectators you don't have the procession. And we noted that there was a huge increase in festivities. There were more cofradías, there were more participants, the floats had gotten heavier and heavier. People spent lots and lots of money on giving their Mary a new dress, or a new crown, or new candelabers with candles. And so we were very interested in why this ritual elaboration, and we connected it first with the economic situation of Spain, of having improved considerably after it became part of the European Union. And then we discovered that the organizations would use the opportunity of taking out loans from the European Union for cultural organizations, and a lot of them had used that to make we call it club housing, where the float was kept, where some of them had a little museum, but mostly it was a bar. It had a bar function and a function for all the say, members who wanted to have a special, who had a special occasion, a special birthday, or even marriage could be celebrated at their clubhouse. So it was interesting from an economic point of view. It was interesting from an identity point of view, because the migrants who had left the village would all return for the Holy Week event. And so it was a renewal of the community feeling and the community identity. But another reason we found was that the increase was also due to women, because the village had not grown that much, but the women had become members. And the word cofradia already indicates brotherhood, that before it were mainly men and occasionally a woman, and a woman of course would take care of the dress of her husband and all that, and be an onlooker in the procession. But now more and more women could participate, because some of them, or many of them, had gotten jobs and could economically contribute to the fees that were required to be a member, or to buy the dress, or to participate and use the bar. And so in our first article we decided we write about the women, so the women and the increase of the festivities. And another reason why we thought we write these articles was that doing research on festivities is fun. You have, if you study HIV or sexuality in times of HIV, I mean, these are difficult type of researches. But studying the Holy Week procession is just fun, because people are prepared, they have free time, they are all dressed up, they want to show you how nice they look like, or how nice their partner or their child looks like. And so they're very fun to research, especially if you're at an older age and you want to make it a little bit easy for yourself, and you can do that. So after doing the women, we decided now we do the men. So the next time we went back, and then we went to study the men. So it was all, as by the way, it was in this context of the women. When we went back to study the men, we went to another town, and it was there that I was a little bit disappointed of not seeing the women, because in the village the women had started their own group and started to take over their own procession at Easter, which the men didn't want to have. So they were far more visible. But in Malaga, at first sight, I did not see enough women to confirm my hypothesis that it were the women who made for the increase in participation. So that's why I was so happily surprised when after the festivities seemed to have ended, there was another row of festivities, and there the women suddenly had first place, and they were the carriers. As for the men, it was fascinating to see in Malaga all types of masculinities being confirmed or being expressed through the ritual. And Malaga is a military base, and there also the Spanish Legion is located. And actually there's a whole tension going on, or discussion going on, whether the Spanish Legion should participate in the Semana Santa. And actually for many people that's the whole fun of it, the participation of the Spanish Legion, because part of the rituals are that the Spanish legions arrives by boat, and then they run to the center of town, and they show off their masculinity. And they show off their masculinity by carrying guns, by running through the streets, by carrying a cross called the Christ of the Good Death, by singing songs. I am the betrothed of the good novio de la muerte. I'm the betrothed of death. And so they go to a certain cofradia house, and they take out Christ of the Good Death, and they handle it. They handle it with only a few men, and it's a very large and a very heavy cross. And the idea is that they show off their masculine strength, and we call it hypermasculinity, by carrying it with one hand and by doing all kinds of exercises with the cross, and also by during the processions having all kinds of how shall I explain it? Little theatrical shows of throwing over guns and show what they do with their weapons. And of course, the children really like it, especially the little boys, and they dress up like Spanish legionnaires, and they copy it, and they run like the legionnaires, and they have their fake guns, and it's all part of the procession. So some people think, well, this is not really very religious, and somehow it was also interesting to see the crowd, because the crowd makes the theatrical event. And we noted that both the legionnaires, but also Mary compared to Christ, the whole story is about Christ, but Mary attracts much more attention from the crowd. And sometimes when first Mary leaves the church and then Christ leaves the church, a large part of the crowd has already left by the time Christ leaves the church, because they're only interested in Mary, which confirms my previous idea that female saints are much more widespread, but much more venerated than male saints. And also here you have this negotiation about the meanings that have to be given to things. So we attended masses, and especially some masses where the priest really desperately tried to make people be devoted to Christ rather than Mary, and they should call Mary not mi guapa, but give her, mi guapa is my beautiful one, and not say things like she or Mary is much nicer than that whore of yours, expressing the competition between the different groups, so that these things were not very much appreciated by the priests. So the priests also sometimes did not want to be in front of certain processions that they knew would end up in debauchery and drinking and all that the church did not want. So there were, of course, conservative groups that thought that most of these processions were going in the wrong direction, or attended by the wrong people, so they made their own very solemn processions where there were no lights, no candles, no singing, no music, but just a bare cross being carried on Friday evening, and no one was supposed to say a word. So you have all these different parties represented, different stakeholders, each having their own reasons why they do things and why they participate in the ritual. But that's also the most interesting thing for us to see, all these different reasons why people do things. But let me return to the masculinity part, because the heaviness of the float that they carry around is also a way to show the masculinity, because some floats have to be carried by 300 men in order to be able to be carried. So in other towns, sometimes the float is put on wheels, but then that's for many not done. It's not what you do. You have to carry yourself. And in the beginning, in Malaga, they were carried by the dock workers, the costaleros. And the dock workers at a certain point, and I forgot the exact date, but they decided that they did not get paid enough for carrying the floats. So they left the float in the middle of the street and departed for a strike. And then the members of the cofradia decided, well, from now on we should carry the float. And then you see a reverse movement, reverse development from having to be paid for it, that now the man in the most prestigious position have to pay to the cofradia to be able to take that position. So the outside is more valued than in the inside, and the real carriers are underneath the float's cover, so you don't even see them. So you can't count from the outside. You don't see all the men who are carrying the floats. But in this way, you also see a sort of gentrified masculinity, that the person who has the most money can buy himself a proper place and show off in carrying the float, while actually the float is being carried by the strong man underneath the cover. It made me think of one Spanish scholar who was studying boyhood and coming of age of boys in Sevilla, and he said, well, actually there are no rites of passage here for boyhood. And then I thought, and I read the article, and then I thought he just forgot the Semana Santa, because the Semana Santa is one big ritual of manhood, and the men train for it. They go to fitness centers in order to physically train, in order to be able to carry the float. And it's not just a religious thing, because one man told us, I don't like the Semana Santa at all. If I can, I'm off. But I only carry Cristo, because my mother really loved Cristo, and every time if I see Cristo, I have to think of my mother. So I carry the float, and now his son is taking it over in carrying the float for him. So they have all kinds of reasons why they do certain things. And and another one was how much drink can you manage. That was in we did not see that in Malaga, by the way, but only in Santa Aya, where we knew the people, because then they would lift their gown and they would show this entrapment of wearing a bottle of drink and then having a little pipe to sip from during the procession. And then certain processions in certain neighborhoods really ended up really drunken. And I have a film on YouTube where Mary is sort of moving back and forth while the young men all sing these yells, and it becomes obscene, and they make all kinds of references to sexuality. And at a certain moment, I really had to laugh, because a young man didn't know I spoke Spanish. So, and what they do is they have this huge water jug, but they fill it with wine, and that's not weak wine, but it's the Montilla. It's like sherry, so it has extra alcohol, so you get really drunk from it. And so he offered me the jug of wine, and he said, "Here, drink the blood of Christ, so that your chocho gets hot." I don't know the English translation, but you understand. And I started laughing so loud, and then the girl next to him says, "She understands." You shouldn't say that. So this whole boisterous atmosphere where everything comes together, and they have a lot of fun. But so that's why doing that type of research is also a lot of fun, although not very religious, I must confess. For some people it is, but for others it's not. So after doing the women and doing the man, we decided to do the children, because in another town in Antequera we had observed a poster with a child on it. And then suddenly we wondered, why didn't we ever look at children, and what about the role of children in rituals, and shouldn't we come and have a look here next year and do the children. So this was year after year. So next year we went back, we went to another town with Anthropologica, and Anthropologica's specialization is that part of the town is on top of a hill, and then 4 of the processions end by running up with their floats up the hill. And it's kind of dangerous because beforehand all kinds of leaflets are handed out. Be careful, because no rolling objects, no children running, and no chains, so that you run with several youngsters, because of course this is especially for the young people who really enjoy these things. And so they run up with the float on top. But we were there for the children, so here no children were allowed. So we asked about the children, and then it turned out that the child we had seen on the poster, there was this whole story about the lost child. And so we called our article the Lost Child, Children in Ritual in Southern Spain. Or something. And then the Lost Child refers to one image, the image of Jesus who gets lost in the temple, and his parents go away from Jerusalem to discover that the child Jesus is left behind, and they return to the temple and find him lecturing the elders. And so they have this image of the child Jesus, which is called the Lost Child. But then you also had a story in town. Also here the cofradias were in competition with each other, as in the running, who could run the fastest or the best. But an element of this competition was that there was this story about a child being lost, and the child after the running had entered the wrong church, and one party was looking all the time for the kid, and then the enemy had taken the kid and not returned it in due time. And it was funny, because when we asked one group about it, we said, well, this is the story about the lost child. Was it one from above? Because all these cofradias, they have a very long name of the holy related to Christ or Jesus or Mary or whatever, and then they have a short name, but then also they have a local name. So in this case it was those from above and those from below who were constantly in competition with each other. And then he said, it was a child from above, but how do you know? Because now you know everything about us. And but to shorten the story, what we did was we used this in order to argue for an inclusion of children in the study of ritual, because children are very important in ritual. In the first place, the child as a key symbol. Think of the child and the baby Jesus as a key symbol, and also in this case the child was an important symbol in the festivities in town. Apart from their use as a symbol, we find rituals very important in the transformation of cultural information to children, and children are prepared for their adulthood by way of participating in these rituals, and by learning what is needed to be learned from their parents. And a third reason to write about it was why to argue for the attention for children in ritual is because children are active participants. Actually, they're part of the changes that are taking place in the rituals. We found, for instance, that children decided for themselves to which cofradia, to which group they wanted to belong, whether it was for the music, or whether it was because their friends were there, or whether because they liked the image. And these groups also made children delegations. Some had a special children's sections, and the children could influence the ritual and the participation of other children in the ritual. So children are just not only empty vessels to be filled with information from the rest of the culture, or effective as symbols, but also can change things. And I think that's very important to know, and also a reason why children should be more integrated into anthropological monographies and not used only as a separate topic, but part of the population and part of our respondents.